My great uncle Arthur comes from an artistic family, many generations before him and since. What Arthur took was his artistic talent married with his medical education and his determination to discover the world around him and turn that into the consulting detective Sherlock Holmes. He could never have imagined that the character would have such force, such apparent life energy, that he would leap from the page and millions of people would think he was a real person. When he first wrote the story and he killed Sherlock Holmes at the Reichenbach Falls, people wore black, people wore armbands, a nation mourned. It was extraordinary. And then of course he had to resurrect him. The fact that he was able to create a character that meant so much to so many people that they mourned as if a member of their own family had died is just the most remarkable thing. I think something many visitors to the museum would be surprised to hear is that Arthur wasn't born into money. He came from a very poor family that had fallen on hard times, lived in Edinburgh, it was a tough city, and he really pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and he went to medical university at Edinburgh because that was his local university. Their specialty was medicine, and he got into medicine as a way to feed his family. But something I've got at home, which is a plaque that I think he'd made a very long time ago, was a saying of his, which is, "There's no such thing as luck. It is hard work, courage, and pluck." People think Arthur possibly had it all. He didn't. Everything he achieved, he made just sheer hard work and determination. And not everything worked. Being a doctor didn't work. So he carried on being a doctor, worked at his writing, and the writing did work. He was a real man. He dealt with real life, and he dealt with it well. He was a good, kind, straightforward guy who respected his fellow man. My grandfather stayed with Arthur when he was a struggling doctor in Southsea and would have been living with him when he first started writing his stories, and they shared many adventures together. Arthur was a keen motorist, motor car and motorcycle, but in one of his first cars he rolled it when turning into his house in Hindhead, and both he and his younger brother were trapped underneath the car. And the truth is, if the good people of Hindhead hadn't lifted the car off them both, perhaps I wouldn't be here to tell the story. Before he was a doctor in Southsea, he worked as a ship's doctor on a whaling ship. And when the ship was moored in an ice floe, they were out on the ice, and in one day he fell through the ice several times. So the mere fact he survived, bearing in mind these were days when they wore natural clothing, none of this modern flotation aids, the fact that he even lived through the day, managed to get back on the ship, get dry, to get back on the ice, to fall in the ice again, is just remarkable. He never let anything stop him at all. We think he fitted about 5 lifetimes into the one. He really enjoyed sport, and he was the first goalkeeper for Portsmouth Town Football Club, which was a professional football club, although gentlemen paid it in those days, and I don't think he was paid for his efforts. So he enjoyed football, and to Americans that would be soccer. When holidaying in Switzerland, he regularly went to Switzerland with his first wife because she had consumption, and the doctors had advised that the high, cold Swiss air was good for her illness. He met some Swiss gentlemen who were skiing near Davos, and they lent him some skis. And he enjoyed it so much that when he got home he wrote an article about it, and some people say that was one of the real cornerstones of skiing in Switzerland. A lot of people don't know that Arthur used to take tea, whether it was tea we don't really know, with Winston Churchill during the Great War. That's the First War, not the second one. And he was probably one of the first people to really propose and put forward to the government that soldiers should have body armour. And he actually sent plans for armour to the Ministry of War in the First World War because he saw the senseless death that the new machine gun was causing, and he wanted to save the common soldier. There's a wonderful story about a dinner he had in London with the publisher of Lippincott's magazine, a magazine that his early stories had been published in America. And it was with the publisher, an Irish MP, and another interesting gentleman. And the result of this dinner was that Conan Doyle came away and wrote a great story, The Sign of the Four, which I'd always wondered if the name came from the four people sat at that table, because it should be noted that the fourth person at the table was Oscar Wilde, who as a result of the same meeting wrote the story Dorian Gray. Something perhaps Arthur didn't think about at the time, but something that's happened since is the interesting and inspirational nature of his stories encourage people to start thinking for themselves, and the exhibition really takes this, and I think it's something that Arthur would really appreciate. He was keen on people being well educated, being able to communicate and making the absolute most of themselves, and I think something that runs through all of his stories is he was very keen on people thinking for themselves, making their own decisions. It takes his original introduction to people about science and the practical application of science, and it brings it to a completely new audience. So it's been covered in print, it's been covered on the screen, but now there is an interactive, hands-on exhibition where people get a real chance to try and keep up with the consulting detective as he solves another crime. I think it's excellent, makes people think.